Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Balance Your Productivity live session here every Wednesday at 4:30 p.m. If you're watching this live, thanks for joining me, and do pop something in the comments if you'd like to ask a question or have a comment, and I'll endeavour to keep an eye on that as well. If you're watching it after, if you're watching the recording, then feel free to add a comment, ask a question, and I will come back to you as soon as I see those, and you can do that in the comments below. If there's anything specific that you would like me to cover in these sessions, then do just ask or get in touch with me. In this session, I'm going to touch on another aspect of communication around being more assertive. So that's something that I think a lot of people are sort of lacking in confidence, and it feeds into what I was talking about in previous sessions around how we communicate, giving and receiving feedback, and improving the way that we communicate with each other, both at work and at home. So this week's topic is about being more assertive. And I mean, I've been involved in discussions at various times about aggression and assertion, and it seems to be one of my most popular articles that people quite often seem to tap into. It's one of the most highly viewed ones, which is a bit surprising in some ways, because it's not directly related to what I do. So a couple of definitions for both of these terms, aggression and assertion, is aggression. I think we are pretty good at recognizing what is aggressive behavior or aggressive communication. And it's really about initiating hostilities, launching attacks on people, or it's hostile or destructive behavior or actions. Whereas assertion is more about being confident and bold in and asking for what you want. And I'm sure we've all been on the receiving end of unprovoked aggression in the past. Perhaps it's something that you might be unfortunate enough to have to deal with on a more daily basis. So I wanted to just share a few tips and ideas about how you can deal with it. If we find ourselves in the situation where we've wanted to say something, but we didn't want to cause an argument or stir things up, or alternatively, you might have said something in anger, which you later regretted. And that's where, if you can understand the difference between how you can be more assertive and getting across what it is that you want to say, rather than reacting or communicating in a very aggressive way. So aggression is usually the result of too much negative emotion, and it tends to be a hostile attack, usually against someone else. If somebody insults you or criticizes you or belittles you, then they're being aggressive towards you. Or equally, if that's what you're doing to somebody else, you're being aggressive towards them when you insult or criticize or try to belittle somebody. If you're being assertive, you're confident in standing up for yourself and saying what it is that you want. You're confident in your beliefs, while you also maintain respect for other people. So you can be, there's nothing wrong in being assertive and saying what it is that you want, rather than being very passive and either assuming other people will know what you want or not being able to communicate what it is that you want. So if people are unable to communicate effectively, then they may end up, they're either being too passive, or they could end up being overly aggressive if they don't know how to communicate what it is that they want or what they're thinking and what they're feeling. And I talked in the last session about how to communicate more effectively and thinking about our thoughts and feelings and how you can get that across. There's also passive aggression, which comes up quite a lot and is a much more subtle way of being aggressive. It's a tendency to engage in an indirect expression of hostility. You might experience subtle insults, people being very sullen or very stubborn, and it's a sort of deliberate failure to do certain things. And it can be quite hard to spot because it's very subtle, it's very indirect. They're not being overly aggressive, but they are being very passively aggressive. So it is indirect. And whereas if somebody is being obviously aggressive, you can feel hurt from the direct interaction or what they're saying or what they're doing, because it's very obvious. When somebody is being passively aggressive, it's much more difficult to spot, and you might just feel uncomfortable, or there's that sort of, did they really say that, or what did they really mean by that? So it's not as obvious. You may get things like the silent treatment from people who are being passively aggressive, or you're ignored. So, but ignored again in a very sort of subtle way. They might throw subtle insults at you, which is sort of not quite a compliment, but it's a compliment, and there might be an element of, but it's not quite as good as, or something else, comparing it with something else that was slightly better. So it's not a direct compliment, but there is a sort of subtle underlying insult in there. People who are grumpy or sulky or moody are also being passively aggressive in the way they're not communicating how they're thinking or feeling, just sort of going down into that, or it's going to be stubborn, and not really saying why. You're probably familiar with that sort of level of, if you ask somebody, are you fine? And they say yes, when they don't actually mean it. And it's fairly obvious that they're not happy, but they're not prepared to say what it is that is up, or what they're feeling or thinking. So they're potentially just being stubborn. And this is another trait with passive aggressives. They can be stubborn just to annoy or punish you, not for any particular reason. And they just won't get things done, or you ask them to do something and they just fail to do it, or fail to finish things. So if you want to be more assertive with both of these sorts of people, the overtly aggressive and the passively aggressive, then you need to be able to say what it is that you really mean. To be able to say yes when you mean it, and also to be able to say no when you mean it. And I've talked about saying no and how to say no and the importance of that in previous session. So in order to be assertive, you need to be very clear about what it is that you want and how you feel, and communicate this in a calm, unemotional way. And again, with all communication, it's about being very clear, very specific, and very direct. Think about what the facts or the specifics are relating to the situation, and what you're thinking or how you're feeling about it. And one important aspect, again, of being more assertive is to be very clear about your boundaries. And again, boundaries are very important in all sorts of different aspects, but particularly with communication. What is it that you want? And be very clear about what it is and what you will and won't tolerate in a particular situation. So feel that you're able to state clearly what it is you need and why. And particularly if somebody is behaving in a very aggressive way towards you, being able to say, that is not acceptable. I don't like what you're saying, or I don't appreciate the way you're saying it. And just try and communicate in a very calm way. With passive aggressive people, they're likely to make assumptions about what you will or won't do without actually asking. That sort of classic, I'm fine, when they're very obviously not, or asking them if you can do anything, or if they want anything done. They say, no, I'll do it, when they don't really mean it. And then they will then go away and sulk or be stubborn, or you'll get that sort of silent treatment behavior. Be aware of your body language and your tone when you're being assertive, the words that you're using, so that you're not confrontational in the words or tone, even if that's what you're getting from the other person. If you have someone that's being aggressive towards you, then by being more assertive, you can even things out, and you can perhaps even bring things down and calm things down. So, hi Tish. Thanks for joining in. Good to see you here. Be direct and open and honest when you're communicating, and also consider their frame of reference, particularly if things have escalated. It might be that they're seeing things from a different perspective from you, which is going to affect how they're communicating with you, and also the message that they're going to get from you. So being aware of what their values and attitudes and experiences are, and always respect their rights and their points of view and what it is that they're saying. One of the most important things is keeping calm when you're confronted with somebody that's being aggressive, as long as they're not being physically aggressive. And don't rise to the bait. And if they're raising their voice, and what tends to happen is that the other person will start to raise their voice, and then you just end up shouting at each other. So if that happens, you need to stand your ground, but you need to be firm about what you want and keep a very level, calm tone of voice. And be prepared to walk away. If they're really not listening to you, if their tone of voice and their anger is coming out, then if you can, just walk away. They're too angry to listen. They're not going to be hearing what you're saying, and you're not actually going to achieve anything. So those are the sort of the key points around managing aggressive behavior and being more assertive, is to be very clear, be very specific, be very direct, and be very calm and aware of your tone of voice. Thanks, Tish. Just made a comment about DISC. Yeah, I'm familiar with DISC. And it's very useful. I don't generally like to put people in boxes, and I don't think we fit very well into boxes. I've done a lot with the MTBI training when I was working in the corporate world, but it can be useful to understand where other people are coming from and what their preferences are, the ways that they like to communicate, how they like to be sort of deal with things. Are they a detail person, or are they a big picture person? Are they an introvert, or are they an extrovert? Because that will help you get to the right level of communication with them and being able to talk to them in a way that they can understand. So that is a way to really improve how you can communicate if you understand how the other person would like to be communicated with. So that can be really useful. So thanks for that, Tish. So those are just a few sort of tips and thoughts and ideas around how you can be more assertive. And it is a confidence thing. And I think if you feel more confident, it's much easier to be. And if you're lacking in confidence, if you can just think about being very clear and being very direct, and your tone, even if you don't feel it, then that can come across. So thank you for that. There will be more on, I'll be switching on to listening for the next one. So very good communicating and how we can talk and what we can say things and speaking, but we also need to be listening. So I will touch on that in the next session. So, I'm going to put up my, so engrossed in going through that. So if you would like to get in touch, and as ever, there is the free time quiz on my website, then do go along and complete that if you haven't done so already. And if there's anything that you ever want to know, then please do get in touch. And until next time, carry on being productive. Take care.